He punched him right in the face in front of everyone, but not to hurt him. It was a desperate, lightning-fast act to save his life. Seconds earlier, a poisoned glass had been placed before him, carefully, deliberately meant to end everything. No one else saw it. No one else knew, except her. And in that moment, a quiet maid became the only thing standing between a billionaire and a deadly conspiracy. What happened next would shock the entire city, and change her life forever. The gala glittered like a star-filled sky. Crystal chandeliers threw prisms of light across the ballroom, illuminating the city's most elite. Guests sipped champagne, whispered about business deals and social connections, and posed for cameras. Everything seemed flawless, until a flicker of suspicion danced across the eyes of one quiet observer, Elena. Elena worked temporarily as a server at the event, a young woman from modest beginnings who had always noticed details others missed. As she carried trays of champagne past the tables, her gaze caught a subtle irregularity. A man in a dark cap had lingered too long near the wine crates, exchanging a small brown envelope with one of the bartenders. A folded napkin marked one glass, separate from the others. The scene made her stomach tighten. It wasn't her job to investigate, but Elena's intuition screamed that something was off. She tried to alert the floor captain, but he dismissed her warnings. "Focus on serving," he said, brushing her concern aside. Her eyes flicked to the main stage where Lucas, the billionaire honoree, was chatting with the guests. His laughter was bright, effortless, but Elena could see the stakes were higher than anyone realized. Meanwhile, backstage, Vanessa, the fiancé, and Cameron, the company executive, exchanged subtle glances. Their masks of grief and concern were flawless, but Elena had begun to notice their micro-expressions. The twitch of a lip, the tension in a hand. She memorized each movement, each look, storing them like puzzle pieces. Then it happened. A champagne glass on a tray was knocked over. A guest shrieked, thinking it an accident, but Elena's pulse raced. That wasn't a spill. That was a setup. Vanessa's theatrical gasp and trembled hand were perfectly timed, designed to convince the world that something tragic had almost occurred. But Elena had seen enough. She squared her shoulders and prepared to act. The first hint of chaos arrived when the screen flickered. CCTV footage of the service corridor, previously hidden, was suddenly visible for all to see. Guests murmured in confusion, their attention torn between Vanessa's dramatic wails and the glowing video display. Belinda, Vanessa's close associate, saw the evidence in real time. Her face crumpled, the bravado draining away. Elena's suspicions solidified. Vanessa's theatrics escalated. She grabbed the MC's microphone from his frozen hand. Tears streaked her perfect face. "This is all a setup," she cried, pointing at Elena. "She is obsessed. She staged this whole drama." Some guests whispered in confusion. The story was absurd, almost believable, but the blue-colored chemical test strip in the security head's hand told the truth. Lies couldn't change chemical proof. Dennis, the head of security, ignored Vanessa's performance. He approached the trembling bartender, Santo, and demanded his phone. Within seconds, the transfers from an untraceable consulting firm appeared. The name behind the transactions was Cameron, the executive, and Elena recognized it. Chinedu, or Cameron, under a false identity, was the loose end Lucas had feared. The gala's glamour gave way to controlled chaos. Police units and private lab teams moved in. Evidence was collected. The blue-stickered bottle, the marked napkin, Santo's phone, the CCTV laptop. Vanessa's tears disappeared. She demanded her lawyer. Cameron tried to leave quietly, but Dennis stopped him cold. "You're staying," he said. Amid the storm, Elena was led to a side lounge by Dennis. Lucas soon joined her, jaw bruised but eyes sharp. "Tell me everything," he said softly. Elena recounted what she saw. The man in the cap, the brown envelope, the tiny blue sticker, the subtle signals, the fold on the napkin, and the fear etched into Santo's face. She admitted to striking Lucas in desperation, her hand trembling. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "You chose the sure way," he said quietly. Gratitude filled the room. The hall had transformed. What had been a glittering ballroom just moments ago was now a controlled crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off the bar area. Police officers moved briskly among the guests, and the faint hum of lab equipment filled the space. Cameras flashed from every corner, capturing the tense standoff. Elena stood near a quiet corner, her heart still hammering, watching the events unfold. The web of deceit was unraveling thread by thread. Santo, the bartender, trembled as he handed over his phone to Dennis. The man's hands shook so violently that it was clear fear had been a constant companion, not just a sudden panic. "It's all there," Dennis murmured, scrolling through transactions. 2 large sums had moved from an obscure consulting firm into accounts linked to Cameron. Every detail pointed to a coordinated plan, a carefully orchestrated attempt to eliminate Lucas, leaving Vanessa as the grieving fiancée to manipulate the public narrative. Vanessa, noticing that the police had started their formal investigation, shed her earlier tears like a costume. Her expression hardened, her voice sharp. "I want my lawyer," she demanded, stripping away the last pretense of vulnerability. Cameron stood beside her, the perfect mask of concern plastered over his face. But Elena had been watching them all night. She knew it was false concern, a performance refined over years of deception. Santo, finally breaking under pressure, began to talk. He admitted everything. The pressure from the man in the cap, the promise of money to clear his debts, the instructions to keep one bottle separate and serve it only to Lucas. He described the folded napkin that marked the glass, the subtle signals between Vanessa and Cameron, the whisper of a silk voice in his ear urging him to make it smooth. Fear had ruled him completely. Refusal was not an option. Elena's pulse quickened. Every confession she heard, every piece of evidence collected, confirmed what she had suspected. The plan had been meticulous. The poison in the glass was fast-acting and undetectable, meant to target only one person: Lucas. No other drink had been contaminated. The stakes could not have been higher, and Elena had been at the center of the unraveling truth. Belinda, Vanessa's co-conspirator, was next. Her face, once confident and scheming, now crumpled under the weight of exposure. Tears streamed freely as she was questioned. Elena noted the subtle relief that Belinda's confession brought. It meant one less liar to manipulate the narrative. Even in her own fear, Elena understood the power of truth. The detectives moved to Vanessa and Cameron. Their lawyers stood like shields, but the officers were resolute. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder," the lead detective announced, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Vanessa's glamorous facade cracked completely. She lunged toward Lucas, desperate. "Michael, please help me. I was forced into it." Lucas, however, did not respond. His eyes, clear and steady, never left Elena's. "I believe the person who acted to protect me," he said, his voice unwavering. In that moment, Elena realized the gravity of her actions. She had stepped forward in a moment of fear and instinct, and it had been recognized, not as a crime but as an extraordinary act of courage. Outside, the city's elite and media waited with bated breath. The story of a foiled murder plot at the prestigious Stellan charity gala had spread like wildfire. Reporters jostled, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. Lucas, flanked by Dennis, faced them briefly, his tone calm and measured. "There was a serious incident tonight. A staff member acted with incredible bravery and prevented a tragedy. We are cooperating fully with the authorities." Even as the press scrambled for answers, Elena remained quiet, watching the controlled chaos. She felt the adrenaline leaving her body, replaced by an exhaustion so deep it bordered on numbness. In a single evening she had lost her job, assaulted a billionaire, and become the center of a criminal investigation. Fear, responsibility, and courage mingled inside her, creating a strange clarity she had never known. Dennis approached her quietly. "You're not finished," he said gently, reading the despair on her face. "You're just beginning." Elena nodded, a single tear escaping. She didn't know if she could fully believe it yet, but for the first time she allowed herself a sliver of hope. Meanwhile, police investigators continued to peel back layers of corporate deception. Cameron's fraudulent schemes were uncovered. Shell companies' inflated contracts siphoned millions. Vanessa's extravagant lifestyle, funded by Cameron's illicit transfers, revealed the partnership of ambition and greed. The scope of the conspiracy was enormous, but the authorities had Elena's observations and Santo's cooperation as the backbone of the case. Hours passed, and one by one, confessions and evidence built an undeniable narrative. Each piece, from CCTV footage to financial records to lab tests of the poison, completed the puzzle. Elena remained at the edge of it all, watching as truth overtook manipulation. Finally, as the first arrests were made, Elena felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. Belinda was taken into custody first, followed by Vanessa and Cameron. Their fall was public and complete, their carefully constructed facades shattered. Lucas, his jaw tender but his spirit intact, turned to Elena with a quiet smile of gratitude. In that look she understood the magnitude of her choice. The night had begun with glitter and suspicion, but it ended with justice and clarity. Elena's courage had been a silent beacon, unnoticed by most but decisive in the face of danger. And for her a new chapter was beginning, not just in the life of Lucas but in her own. The morning after the gala the city was buzzing. News outlets had already picked up the story. Maid saves billionaire from poisoned glass at charity gala. Social media was ablaze with clips, headlines and speculation. Elena sat on the edge of her small bed, her phone buzzing constantly. Her mother, frail but alert, sat nearby knitting quietly, though her eyes kept darting toward the screen trying to follow the story. "Elena," her mother whispered, voice trembling, "is this really happening? Did you really save him?" Elena nodded, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The adrenaline from the night before had faded, leaving her hollow and exhausted. She hadn't expected recognition and certainly not this level of attention. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who had simply acted out of instinct, a reflex to protect a life that could have been lost. Her phone vibrated again. A message from Dennis: "Stay put. Lucas wants to see you today. Don't panic. Just breathe." Elena exhaled slowly, a lump forming in her throat. She hadn't prepared for this. The thought of facing Lucas alone outside of the chaotic gala made her stomach twist. Yet a strange resolve began to settle over her. Whatever happened, she would meet him. By mid-morning, a discreet car arrived outside her building. A driver, professional and unobtrusive, waited with the door open. Elena's nerves were taut as she stepped inside. The city blurred past her as the car drove toward the towering headquarters of the Laros Community Foundation, a world away from her modest neighborhood. Inside, the foundation's offices were quiet, professional, and serene. Elena was led to a conference room on a high floor. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, sunlight glinting off glass towers and rooftops. Lucas was already there, sitting at the long polished table, looking tired but composed. His jaw bore a faint shadow of the bruise from the previous night, yet his eyes were sharp and observant. "Elena," he began, voice calm, "thank you, properly this time." He gestured toward a thick folder on the table. Hesitant, she moved closer, opening it slowly. Inside were documents covering the next year's rent for her family, a full provision for her mother's medical bills, and a financial plan to ensure stability. Elena's breath caught. The weight of this act, this acknowledgement of her courage, hit her like a wave. I can't accept this," she stammered. I did what anyone would do." Lucas shook his head, firm but gentle. "No, you did what no one else did. You risked your life to save mine. This isn't charity. It's gratitude. Let me help you, Elena. Please." Tears pricked her eyes. She had spent years worrying about survival, about keeping her family afloat, about navigating a world that constantly seemed stacked against her. And now, in one quiet, deliberate gesture, Lucas had given her something she hadn't dared to hope for: stability, respect, and a chance at a future. Over the next few days, Elena began to see the impact of her actions ripple outward. News outlets ran stories, cautiously omitting her name initially to protect her privacy. But it wasn't long before colleagues from the gala and foundation came forward, praising her bravery. Messages of gratitude, encouragement, and admiration poured in. Despite the recognition, Elena remained humble, wary of the spotlight. She returned to her modest apartment where her mother awaited, curious and anxious. "Everything is okay now," Elena reassured her, hugging her tightly. She recounted the night, the poison, the punch, the arrests, and finally the unexpected opportunity that had emerged from chaos. Her mother's frail hands shook as she held Elena's face, whispering, "My brave girl. You saved a life, and now you've saved yourself." Meanwhile, at the Laros Community Foundation, the board convened to discuss the gala, the arrests, and the emerging audit results. Lucas requested a deep investigation into Cameron's fraudulent activities and Vanessa's accomplice network. The findings were damning. Millions siphoned, shell companies, inflated contracts, and a lavish lifestyle funded by deception. Justice, it seemed, was both swift and thorough. Elena, though exhausted, found herself slowly adapting to her new reality. She was no longer the invisible maid, the temporary worker scraping by. She had a purpose. She had a role. Lucas, recognizing her talent and vigilance, offered her a permanent position as a community liaison for the Foundation's scholarship program, a role designed to identify students with potential but without opportunity. Her first day on the job was surreal. The quiet offices, the respect shown by colleagues, and the sense that her insights were valued. All of it was unfamiliar but welcome. She worked alongside Lucas on school visits and community projects, her natural perceptiveness proving invaluable. Every detail she noticed, every student she advocated for, reinforced the trust Lucas had placed in her. Dennis, the stoic security officer, remained a quiet support and occasional source of levity. "I still think you owe me a boxing lesson," he joked one afternoon after a particularly tense visit. "That left hook of yours. It's a skill I need to learn." Elena laughed for the first time in what felt like months. A full, unguarded laugh. At the Foundation's rooftop garden, Lucas hosted a small, private gathering to thank the team who had stood by him. No press, no spectacle, just loyalty, friendship, and quiet celebration. As Lucas raised his glass, his gaze found Elena's. "To those who act when seconds matter," he said softly, meaning every word. Elena lifted her own glass, feeling the weight of fear lift, replaced by hope, dignity, and the quiet promise of a new beginning. The city lights twinkled below, indifferent to the small, human triumphs above. But Elena knew that tonight, something profound had shifted. Fear had given way to courage, poverty to stability, and despair to purpose. And in that transformation she found herself, finally, truly, standing on the threshold of a life reborn. The week following the gala was a blur of meetings, interviews, and whispers in hallways. Elena found herself navigating a world that had always seemed out of reach. The Foundation offices were orderly and calm, but each step she took carried the weight of her sudden fame and new responsibilities. Her mornings now began with briefing sessions alongside Lucas and the core team. Each day she reviewed school visits, scholarship applications, and community outreach plans. Her keen eye for detail, once unnoticed, became a prized asset. She noticed subtle signs of need among students, children who hid injuries, skipped meals, or lingered on the edges of the classroom. She flagged them, documented them, and advocated for resources on their behalf. Yet even amidst her newfound purpose, shadows from the past lingered. News outlets had uncovered the identities of those involved in the plot against Lucas. Vanessa and Cameron's arrests dominated headlines for days. Gossip, speculation, and half-truths swirled online, sometimes conflating fact with rumor. Elena read the articles cautiously, aware that her own role could easily be misrepresented. Her phone buzzed constantly. Messages of support from strangers were mingled with inquiries from reporters, some polite, others aggressive. Lucas had made it clear, she did not have to respond. Privacy mattered. Still, Elena felt the pressure mounting, the eyes of the city upon her. Dennis, ever a steady presence, noticed the tension etched on her face during one particularly hectic morning. "You're carrying too much," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Even heroes need to breathe." Elena managed a small, tired smile. I don't want to make a mistake. I want to do this right." Dennis leaned back, arms crossed, his face softening. "Then do what you've always done. Notice, act, and stay honest. That's how you got this far." Despite his reassurance, Elena felt uneasy. The gala, the poison, the near-fatal risk. It all replayed in her mind. Every decision she made now seemed amplified, as if one misstep could unravel the fragile thread of trust and opportunity she had been given. Lucas noticed her hesitation during a team meeting. "Elena," he said quietly, pausing the discussion of a new scholarship initiative, "you saved my life. That was courage. But now the world is watching. People will try to influence you, distract you, or even take advantage of your position. Remember why you're here. Focus on the work. That's your strength." His words grounded her. She nodded, the resolve in her chest hardening. She wasn't just a survivor or a hero by chance. She had purpose and she would wield it carefully. Later that afternoon, Elena received an unexpected visit from Detective Ramos, one of the lead investigators from the gala case. He brought a file neatly bound in a black folder. "I wanted you to see this first," he said, placing it on her desk. Inside were copies of CCTV footage, statements from staff, and preliminary lab results confirming the attempted poisoning. "It's a lot," Elena murmured, leafing through the documents. "Why show me this?" Ramos's expression was steady. "Because truth matters and so do those who act for it. You need to understand the weight of what happened, and what could have happened. It will also help you if you ever testify in court. They'll try to discredit you, question your motives." Elena's stomach tightened. The thought of being questioned in a courtroom facing lawyers trained to dismantle her credibility was terrifying. But she recognized the necessity. Justice for Lucas and for herself required courage once more. The next few days were a delicate balance. Elena trained herself for possible testimony, attended strategy meetings with Lucas's legal team, and continued her work at the foundation. Each task grounded her, even as the public eye hovered, ready to magnify any misstep. Amid this whirlwind, Elena began to see the subtle ways her actions were shaping the foundation's work. Students she advocated for received tutoring, meals, and mentorship programs. Schools previously overlooked now had representatives ensuring resources reached the children most in need. Her insight was practical, informed by years of navigating hardship herself. And yet she couldn't ignore the lingering tension. Vanessa's presence in the news, the trial looming, and the occasional whisper of revenge from Cameron's associates reminded her that danger had not entirely vanished. Each day required vigilance, a careful awareness of surroundings and a readiness to act. In moments of quiet, Elena reflected on how far she had come. From a temporary maid scrubbing floors and fetching trays, to a central figure in a life-saving event, to now shaping programs that could change the lives of hundreds. Her transformation was profound. But she also knew it was fragile. Her courage alone would not shield her from the challenges ahead. She would need wisdom, patience, and the support of those she trusted. By evening, as the city's skyline gleamed against the setting sun, Elena sat by the window in her modest apartment, notebook in hand. She wrote lists of students, observations from visits, and plans for the upcoming weeks. The phone lay silent for a few moments and she allowed herself a rare exhale. Dennis had been right. Even heroes needed to breathe. And in that pause, Elena recognized something essential. Her actions, though celebrated, were part of a larger purpose. She wasn't just surviving or reacting. She was shaping, building, and protecting, both lives and futures. The shadows of the past still whispered at the edges of her consciousness, but she felt ready. The coming days would test her resolve, push her limits, and challenge the very courage that had saved Lucas. But she was no longer the frightened, scrappy girl from the back rooms of a gala. She was Elena, observant, decisive, and ready to act when the moment demanded. And she would not fail. The courthouse loomed over the city like a silent sentinel, its stone facade gleaming in the morning sun. Elena approached with a mixture of trepidation and resolve, clutching the leather folder that contained her notes, observations, and recollections from the gala. Today marked the beginning of the trial against Vanessa and Cameron, two of the most powerful figures in the city, charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. Inside, the air was heavy with tension. Reporters and photographers swarmed the steps, their cameras flashing like a storm of artificial lightning. Security personnel guided citizens and legal teams into the grand hall, where high ceilings and polished wood created an atmosphere of reverent authority. Elena's heart pounded, but she reminded herself of Lucas's words. Focus on the work. That's your strength. The courtroom itself was a theater of power. Cameron and Vanessa sat flanked by their legal team, exuding a confidence that Elena knew was carefully crafted. Behind them, family members and colleagues whispered in hushed tones. Across the room, Lucas watched from the plaintiff's side, his jaw still slightly tender from the gala incident but his expression unwavering. Dennis stood nearby, his presence a silent shield, reassuring her that she was not alone. The proceedings began with opening statements. The prosecuting attorney painted a chilling picture of calculated betrayal and greed. This was not a random act, he said, voice ringing through the chamber. It was planned, deliberate, and executed with a precision that could have ended in tragedy. The defendants sought to manipulate, coerce, and ultimately eliminate a man for personal gain. And in the process they placed lives at risk. Vanessa's defense attorney moved next, attempting to portray her client as a grieving fiancé caught in circumstances beyond her control. My client, he argued, was unaware of the specific details of any alleged plot. Any accusations are exaggerated and rely on unreliable witnesses. The prosecution seeks to tarnish a woman's reputation without substantiated proof. Elena listened carefully, noting the subtle ways the defense tried to manipulate perception. They emphasized her socioeconomic status, her temporary employment, and her lack of experience, suggesting she was motivated by attention or envy. But she had prepared for this. Her notes were precise, her recollections factual, and her resolve unshakable. When her turn came, Elena walked to the witness stand. She felt the weight of the room, the eyes of hundreds focused on her. But she drew strength from what she knew, the truth. She spoke slowly, clearly, recounting every detail she had observed at the gala. The man in the cap, the brown envelope, the tiny blue sticker on the wine crate, the folded napkin that marked Lucas's glass, and the interactions between the conspirators. Her testimony was meticulous. She described Santo's fear, Chinedu's subtle manipulations, and Vanessa's cold, deliberate instructions. Every action, every gesture was documented with clarity. The prosecution had prepared visual aids, CCTV footage, photos of fingerprints, lab reports confirming the poison, and financial records linking Cameron and Vanessa to the bribed staff. Each piece reinforced Elena's narrative, transforming her words into irrefutable proof. The defense attempted interruptions, questioning her motivations and casting doubt on her credibility. "You admit to physically assaulting Mr. Lucas," one attorney said. "Can a person who punches a billionaire be trusted as a reliable witness?" Elena held her composure. "I acted to prevent a lethal act. My intervention saved a life. Everything I observed afterward only confirmed the conspiracy. I am not here to seek attention. I am here to tell what I saw as accurately as I can." The court paused as prosecutors presented Santo's confession. He detailed his debts, the threats he received, and how he had been coerced into carrying out the plan. His voice trembled, but the clarity of his words left no room for doubt. He confirmed Vanessa's involvement, describing her perfume, her instructions to serve the poisoned wine, and the fear she instilled in him. The lab report was next. The toxic substance, a colorless and odorless compound, had been isolated from Lucas's glass and the blue stickered bottle. None of the other glasses tested positive. The forensic expert explained the speed and lethality of the compound, emphasizing the precision of the targeted attempt. Throughout the proceedings, Elena remained calm but alert. She answered every question with honesty, never embellishing, never dramatizing. Her consistency, coupled with the overwhelming evidence, left the courtroom leaning toward one undeniable conclusion. Vanessa and Cameron had orchestrated a meticulous and dangerous plot for financial and personal gain. By the afternoon, the judge called a recess. Elena stepped outside into a small courtyard, breathing in the crisp air. Reporters waited, but she avoided their gaze, focusing instead on Lucas and Dennis, who nodded encouragingly from the courthouse steps. She realized the enormity of her role, not as a hero seeking fame, but as a witness whose observations had the power to save lives and ensure justice. As she returned inside, she felt a quiet sense of purpose. The trial would continue for days, each hour a test of patience, resolve, and courage. But Elena was no longer the frightened, temporary maid who had stumbled into danger. She was a protector, an observer, and now, a key player in a story that would resonate far beyond the walls of the courthouse. And she understood as she took her seat that truth, meticulously observed, courageously spoken, and unwaveringly held, was the most powerful weapon of all. The city seemed smaller and larger all at once, compressed by the relentless glare of cameras, flashing phones, and the endless hum of speculation. Elena stepped out of the courthouse into the afternoon sunlight, her leather folder clutched tightly against her chest. Reporters swarmed like hungry predators, microphones thrust forward, eager to capture even a whisper of the trial. "Miss Alvarez, can you tell us your side of the story?" one shouted. Elena shook her head slightly, refusing to engage. She had learned quickly that words spoken in haste could twist into false narratives. Lucas and Dennis flanked her as she made her way toward the car, keeping a careful distance between her and the crowd. The clicks and whirs of cameras followed her every step. Inside the car, she exhaled, the tension finally leaving her shoulders in slow waves. "It's overwhelming," she admitted softly to Lucas, who glanced at her with calm reassurance. "I didn't expect all this." "You didn't seek it," Lucas said firmly. "It found you because you did the right thing. People will try to twist it, but the truth is on your side." Even so, the public fascination was intense. News outlets ran headlines that blurred fact with sensationalism: "The Maid Who Saved a Billionaire," or "Poison Plot at the Gala, How One Woman Stopped a Murder." Social media exploded, memes, tweets, and videos circulating within hours. Some praised her bravery, others questioned her motivations, digging into her background, her family, her life before the gala. At home, Elena's mother held her tightly, shaking with a mixture of pride and fear. "My brave girl," she whispered. "You saved a life, and maybe more than that." The small apartment felt warmer than it ever had, filled with the smell of fresh bread and the faint echo of the evening's news reports. Elena's phone buzzed relentlessly. Messages from old friends, new contacts, and even strangers. Many offered congratulations, some job offers, others requests for interviews. She felt a strange mix of anxiety and disbelief. Her life had shifted so suddenly from monotony and fear to attention, scrutiny, and opportunity. The trial resumed the next morning, this time with the media present in the gallery. Vanessa and Cameron's attorneys attempted to discredit Elena's account, emphasizing her temporary employment and the chaos of the gala. But each attempt faltered under the weight of evidence. CCTV footage, lab reports, Santo's confession, and the financial records linking Cameron's shell companies to Vanessa's lavish spending. Elena spoke again, calmly recounting small but crucial details. The folded napkin marking Lucas's glass, the subtle gestures that signaled the conspirators' intentions, the way Vanessa had whispered instructions to Santo. Every detail, she knew, could mean the difference between justice and impunity. Outside the courthouse, the public reaction was growing. Crowds gathered in front of news stations. Social media exploded with hashtags supporting her bravery, and her story became a symbol of integrity and courage. Friends from her neighborhood sent heartfelt messages. People she had never met reached out to offer support. Lucas noticed the weight of the attention on her. He invited her to a quiet meeting in a nearby cafe, away from cameras. Over steaming cups of coffee, he asked gently, "How are you holding up?" "I'm exhausted," she admitted. "And scared. I didn't expect this. I just wanted to save a life." Lucas nodded. "And you did. You're stronger than you think, Elena. But don't forget, you're allowed to feel overwhelmed. That doesn't take away from your courage." As the trial continued, Elena began to notice small gestures of acknowledgement from people around her. Security personnel gave her respectful nods, court staff whispered words of praise, and even some reporters began to treat her with a careful deference. She realized that courage was not just a public spectacle, it was quietly recognized by those who understood the stakes. One afternoon, as the trial neared a pivotal moment, Lucas pulled her aside. "The foundation board wants to meet with you," he said. "They want to discuss a new opportunity, something that recognizes your skills and dedication. They asked me to bring you in before the media finds out." Elena felt a rush of emotions. Disbelief, excitement, fear. "Me? Why would they?" "Because you saw what others missed," Lucas said simply. "You acted when it mattered most. They want someone who notices, who cares, who steps up. They see that in you." The recognition was startling. In the days that followed, Elena began meeting with board members, learning about potential roles, and understanding that her actions at the gala had opened doors she hadn't even known existed. She was no longer just a temporary maid, an observer of others' lives. She was becoming a part of something meaningful, a force for positive change. As she left one meeting, walking along the city streets with Lucas and Dennis by her side, she noticed the subtle shifts in how people treated her. Strangers smiled, shopkeepers greeted her warmly, and even the landlord gave a polite nod. The world felt lighter, more hopeful, as if courage had reshaped not only her life but the city around her. That evening, Elena sat by the window of her apartment, looking out at the skyline. The sun dipped behind tall buildings, casting golden light across the streets. She allowed herself a quiet smile, a rare moment of peace. The storm of attention, trial, and scrutiny would continue, but for the first time in her life she felt in control of her story, of her destiny. And she understood something essential. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the quiet decision to act despite it. The courtroom was tense, heavy with anticipation. Elena sat quietly in the witness stand, her hands folded in her lap, trying to calm the fluttering in her chest. Cameras peeked through the gallery, journalists scribbled furiously in notebooks, and the defendants, Vanessa and Cameron, sat across the room, their expressions cold, calculating, and unreadable. The judge's gavel banged sharply, slicing through the hum of the crowd. "We will continue with witness testimony," the judge declared, his voice firm, echoing in the high-ceilinged room. "Miss Alvarez, please recount the events of the gala as you observed them." Elena straightened. The memory of that night was sharp, vivid, and terrifying, but she forced herself to speak slowly and deliberately. "It started with a delivery," she began, her voice calm despite the intensity around her. "I noticed a marked bottle of wine. There was a folded napkin on the tray, a signal. Santo, the bartender, seemed nervous and he kept glancing at Vanessa. Then, her eyes met the jury's and she continued, describing every detail with clarity. The whispers behind the bar, the exchanged envelopes, the subtle gestures coordinating the plot. Vanessa's lawyers tried to interrupt, questioning Elena's credibility. "Is it not true," one asked, "that you are a temporary employee unfamiliar with corporate procedures and possibly biased against the defendants?" Elena shook her head, her calm demeanor unshaken. "I am a temporary employee," she acknowledged. "But what I saw that night, the folded napkin, the separate bottle, the whispered instructions, was not bias or imagination. I saw it clearly and I acted immediately to prevent harm." The gallery held its breath. Even Cameron shifted uneasily in his seat. The lab reports and CCTV footage were damning, each piece of evidence a brick in the wall of truth Elena had helped construct. Santo's confession had removed any doubt of coercion or intimidation. Lucas and Dennis stood nearby, silent sentinels. Dennis's presence was grounding, a reminder that she was not alone, that she had allies who understood the stakes. He gave her a small nod, a silent signal of support. The prosecution called a video technician to display the CCTV footage from multiple angles. Elena watched as the same details she had described unfolded on the large screen. Vanessa approaching Santo, Cameron exchanging envelopes, Belinda handling the marked tray. The colors, movements, and timing matched her account perfectly. The jurors leaned forward, absorbed. Vanessa's face twitched with frustration. Her earlier dramatic performances, crafted to manipulate public perception, faltered under the clarity of evidence. Cameron's stoic composure cracked ever so slightly as he saw his carefully planned scheme unravel before the courtroom. During a break in proceedings, Elena sat quietly, trying to steady her racing thoughts. Her mind replayed the moment she had acted, striking Lucas to save him. She had feared repercussions, legal, social, and personal, but now for the first time she saw her actions as not just necessary but heroic. She had been the difference between life and death. Returning to the courtroom, Elena felt a new confidence. The defense attempted to paint her as a desperate attention seeker, but each attempt fell flat. Her truth was simple, direct, and unwavering. She had no motive for fame or money, only the certainty that she had to act. The judge called for closing statements. The prosecutor spoke with measured intensity, summarizing the chain of events, the evidence, and Elena's bravery. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he concluded, "you have seen the courage of a young woman who risked everything to prevent a tragedy. Her testimony is backed by physical evidence, eyewitness accounts, and confessions. Justice requires that we acknowledge her actions and hold the conspirators accountable." The defense tried one last time to sway opinion, but the impact of the cumulative evidence was undeniable. Elena felt a wave of relief as the jury filed out to deliberate. The hours that followed were excruciating, each tick of the clock stretching endlessly. She and Lucas sat in silence, Dennis occasionally making a light, teasing comment to break the tension. Finally, the jury returned. The foreperson's voice rang out. We, the jury, find the defendants guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and multiple counts of fraud. A hush fell over the courtroom. Cameron's shoulders slumped, Vanessa's face paled, and Elena felt a surge of overwhelming emotion, relief, vindication, and a profound sense of justice. She had faced the powerful, the manipulative, and the dangerous, and she had prevailed. Outside the courthouse, the city awaited. News vans and social media channels broadcast the verdict, praising Elena's courage. Strangers stopped her on the street, offering congratulations, gratitude, and admiration. She felt dizzy with the intensity, yet a quiet satisfaction settled deep inside her. She had acted when it mattered most, and the world had noticed. Lucas placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said simply. "You faced them and you stood your ground." Elena smiled faintly, exhausted but proud. The chapter of fear and uncertainty had closed. A new one, full of promise, recognition, and opportunity, was beginning. The morning sun spilled gold across the city skyline as Elena stepped into the glass-fronted offices of the Langston Foundation. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of freshly brewed coffee and polished wood. For the first time in months, she felt a lightness in her step, a sense of possibility she hadn't known she could feel. Gone were the days of temporary jobs, uncertainty, and fear. She was here not as a maid, not as an observer, but as someone entrusted with responsibility and purpose. Lucas, ever the quiet but dependable presence, walked beside her. "Don't let the grandeur intimidate you," he said with a teasing smile, gesturing at the expansive office space, glass walls reflecting sunlight and ambition alike. "You belong here as much as anyone." Elena swallowed a lump of nerves. She had saved a life, prevented a crime, and exposed a conspiracy that could have devastated an empire, but stepping into this new world felt almost unreal. She had been thrust from the shadows into a place of influence, a role where her insight and courage mattered. Michael Langston, the man whose life she had saved, greeted her personally in the lobby. He was calm, professional, yet his smile carried warmth, appreciation, and respect. "Welcome, Elena," he said. "Your presence here isn't symbolic, it's vital. The foundation exists to find talent and potential where others see none. You have proven that you see what others miss." Her hands instinctively clutched the strap of her bag, a gesture of grounding. Thank you, sir," she murmured, her voice tight with emotion. "I just did what I thought was right." Michael shook his head gently but firmly. "No, Elena. What you did was extraordinary. Courage is not simply acting without fear. It's choosing action when fear is overwhelming. And you chose wisely. That is why we need you here." Her first weeks were filled with orientation, introductions, and immersion into the Foundation's initiatives. She learned about scholarship programs, school outreach, mentorship planning, and community engagement. Every day brought new faces, new stories, and new challenges. Elena's attention to detail, her empathy, and her quick thinking, which had saved a life, were now assets in identifying promising students and assessing opportunities. During one school visit, she observed a quiet boy struggling to read aloud. His eyes darted nervously across the room, and she immediately recognized a familiar pattern of overlooked talent and invisible potential. Kneeling beside him, she offered gentle guidance, encouragement, and support. By the end of the session, he was reading fluently, his confidence blossoming under her care. The sensation of opening doors for others, of changing lives in real time, filled her with a deep sense of fulfillment. Back at the Foundation, Lucas often teased her about her new role. "You're too calm and collected for someone who used to hide behind counters and trays," he joked during lunch in the rooftop garden. Elena laughed, the sound bright and carefree. "I learned to keep my eyes open," she said, smiling. "And sometimes you just have to act." That afternoon, Michael called her into his office. The view of the city stretched endlessly beneath them, a glittering sea of opportunity. "Elena, I wanted to formally recognize your contribution," he said, gesturing to a folder on his polished desk. Inside were certificates of bravery, letters of commendation, and a detailed outline of her new responsibilities. "This isn't charity," he emphasized. "It's a testament to your character and capability. We're investing in your future because you've earned it." Tears pricked Elena's eyes, a mix of relief, pride, and disbelief. She accepted the folder with trembling hands. The folder contained more than papers. It represented security for her family, dignity, and a new beginning. She realized that her courage had not only protected a life but had also opened a path for herself and countless others who would benefit from her advocacy. As weeks turned into months, Elena became a respected member of the foundation team. Her suggestions were sought during strategic meetings, her insight valued in planning community initiatives. She traveled to schools, met with families, and advocated tirelessly for students whose potential was unseen. Each success, each scholarship granted, each student nurtured, was a reminder that her actions had ripple effects far beyond the gala that had changed her life. One quiet evening, as the sun set and painted the rooftop garden in shades of pink and gold, Michael gathered the team for a small, informal celebration. There were no cameras, no headlines, just colleagues acknowledging each other's contributions. Lucas cracked open bottles of sparkling juice, teasingly inspecting the seals before pouring, eliciting laughter from everyone present. Michael raised his glass, his eyes finding Elena's. "To courage, integrity, and those who see the truth when others look away," he said. His voice carried warmth and sincerity, and Elena felt a profound sense of belonging. She lifted her glass, matching his gaze. "To second chances," she replied softly. As the team clinked glasses, Elena looked out at the city below. She thought of her mother, resting peacefully at home, of the small apartment that no longer felt like a cage, and of the students whose lives she had begun to touch. Her journey from uncertainty to purpose had been harrowing, but it had forged in her a quiet strength and unwavering resolve. That night, as she returned home, bags filled with groceries, fresh bread, fruit, and a month's supply of her mother's medicine, Elena felt a fullness she hadn't known was possible. The darkness of fear and uncertainty had lifted. In its place was hope, opportunity, and the knowledge that she had finally found her place. A place where courage was recognized, where purpose was real, and where her life and the lives of others could flourish. Elena's mornings began earlier than most at the Langston Foundation. She would arrive before the bustle of the office, her mind already turning over plans for outreach programs, scholarship assessments, and community events. The city streets were quiet, the first light brushing against the skyscrapers, and for a fleeting moment she felt the calm before the inevitable whirlwind of her day. Her first major assignment as a foundation liaison was to visit a local school with limited resources. The principal, a stern but kind-hearted woman named Mrs. Callahan, welcomed Elena with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "We've had visitors before," she said, her eyes scanning Elena, "but not all of them truly understand our students' needs." Elena smiled, her voice gentle but confident. "I'm here to listen first, to understand the challenges you face, and then to act where I can. I want to be a bridge, not a spectacle." As the day unfolded, Elena observed classrooms, spoke with students, and reviewed academic records. One boy, Samuel, caught her attention. His hands shook as he tried to hold a pencil, his head downcast. At first glance he appeared timid, perhaps lazy, but Elena recognized the signs of frustration masked as hesitation. Kneeling beside him, she guided his hand, helping him write a sentence correctly. The spark of comprehension in his eyes was immediate, a small victory that left her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you, Miss Elena," he whispered, almost afraid to speak. I never thought I could do it." Elena placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You just needed someone to show you how. And I promise I'll be here to help whenever you need me." Later, in a faculty meeting, she presented her observations. Her suggestions were practical: additional tutoring, mentorship programs, and a system to identify hidden talent early. Some teachers were skeptical, wary of change, and wary of someone so new to the system. Elena remained calm, backing every recommendation with evidence she had gathered firsthand. Slowly, her insight won them over. Back at the foundation, Elena's new role came with unexpected challenges. Not all students were eager to accept help, and not all parents welcomed intervention. She found herself negotiating with skeptical guardians, balancing bureaucracy and mediating conflicts. Each encounter tested her patience and her empathy, but with every problem solved, her confidence grew. Lucas noticed the change in her too. During a lunch break on the rooftop garden, he leaned against the railing and said, "You've got the patience of a saint and the courage of someone who's faced real danger. It's remarkable to watch." Elena laughed softly, the sound light but tired. "It's not about courage, Lucas. It's about responsibility. I saw what fear can do to people and I don't want these kids to feel powerless. I can't prevent everything, but I can give them a chance to fight their own battles. Amid her professional growth, personal challenges crept in. The gala, the arrests, and the public attention had left a ripple through her social life. Former colleagues stared at her with awe, while some friends reacted with envy. Social media posts celebrating her bravery circulated widely, attracting praise but also scrutiny. Elena struggled with the new attention, finding herself torn between pride and discomfort. She longed for anonymity, for a life where her deeds didn't define her entirely. Michael noticed her discomfort. One evening, after a long day of school visits, he invited her to his office. "Elena," he said gently, "I know this sudden attention is overwhelming. But remember, your actions are a beacon for others. That's the power of integrity. It inspires even when it's uncomfortable." Elena nodded, understanding the truth in his words, but the weight of expectation pressed on her. She wanted to make a difference without losing herself to the glare of public opinion. Michael, perceptive as always, offered guidance without imposing, trusting her judgment and reinforcing her autonomy. Meanwhile, the foundation's work began to show tangible results. Students who had struggled academically were now excelling. Families who had been overlooked felt supported. Elena's sharp eye for detail and her unwavering commitment turned small victories into lasting change. Each success, no matter how minor, strengthened her sense of purpose and proved that courage coupled with action could reshape lives. Yet she also faced moments of self-doubt. Could she truly sustain this level of responsibility? Would she falter if the stakes rose higher? Every challenge reminded her of the gala, of the poison, and the split-second decision that had altered the course of her life. She drew strength from that memory, using it as a measure of her resolve. If she had acted then, she could act now. Late one afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Elena found herself alone on the rooftop garden, watching the city lights flicker awake. The soft hum of life below reminded her that every choice, every action carried weight. Her journey from fear to courage had not ended with the gala. It had only begun. With each day, she learned that heroism wasn't about grand gestures alone. It was about persistence, care, and unwavering commitment to what was right. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply, savoring the calm before another day of challenges. The city was alive, full of opportunity and struggle, and she had a place in it now. A role she had earned, a purpose she had embraced. And for the first time in her life, Elena felt truly ready, not just to survive, but to lead, to protect, and to inspire others to see the potential they carried within themselves. Elena's sense of accomplishment was still fresh when the foundation received a call from a prestigious private school across the city. The principal had heard about her work and requested her presence to consult on a delicate matter involving a scholarship student, Mariana, who had displayed unusual behavior that hinted at both intelligence and profound emotional distress. The drive to the school was tense. Elena's mind replayed the events of the gala, the arrests, and the public scrutiny. It had been months, yet the memory remained vivid, like a shadow that followed her through the brightest of days. The cityscape blurred past her car window, but her thoughts were sharp, focused on the mission ahead. She reminded herself, courage isn't just about facing life-threatening danger. It's about confronting fear, doubt, and uncertainty every single day. Upon arrival, she was met by Mrs. Holloway, a tall woman with a commanding presence softened by warm eyes. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Rivera," she said, extending her hand. "We're in a bit of a situation, and I believe your perspective could make a significant difference." Elena followed her through polished hallways into a small counseling room. Mariana, a quiet girl with deep, expressive eyes, sat on the edge of a chair, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her uniform. Elena knelt slightly to meet her gaze. "Hi, Mariana. I'm here to help. Nothing you say is wrong, and nothing will be repeated without your permission. You're safe here." The girl's lips trembled and tears threatened to fall. I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I try to focus, I try to be good, but it's like I'm always behind and everyone else. They don't notice." Elena nodded, her heart tight with empathy. "You're not behind. You're navigating a world that often overlooks brilliance hidden in quiet corners. My job is to make sure people like you get seen, get supported, and get the chance to show the world what you can do." Over the next hour, Elena worked patiently with Mariana, unraveling the tangled threads of fear, self-doubt, and perfectionism that had built a prison around the young girl. She suggested mentorship, small incremental goals, and involvement in projects that showcased Mariana's unique abilities. By the end, the student's posture had relaxed, her eyes brighter, and a tentative smile broke through. Elena felt the familiar surge of purpose. However, the relief was short-lived. Back at the foundation, a new challenge awaited. An internal audit had revealed discrepancies in a recently funded project. A small grant, intended for literacy programs in underserved neighborhoods, appeared misappropriated. Elena's analytical instincts kicked in. She reviewed every document, every transaction, every receipt. The deeper she dug, the more she realized the problem was rooted not in malice but in negligence, a lack of oversight by staff she had only recently begun to trust. Lucas noticed her growing concern. "Elena, this isn't on you alone. You've just started and systems take time to stabilize. We'll address it together." She appreciated his reassurance but knew the burden of leadership often meant making tough calls before others were ready. She organized a meeting with the project coordinators, speaking firmly yet compassionately. "We need accountability," she said. "This isn't about blame. It's about protecting our mission and the students who rely on it. Mistakes happen, but repeated oversight failures are unacceptable. We need transparency and immediate corrective action." The room was tense, but the staff, recognizing her integrity and clarity, nodded. By the end of the session, a plan was in place to correct the errors, reinforce documentation procedures, and ensure proper training. Elena felt a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction, knowing that progress, while messy, was possible when guided by principle. As night fell, Elena returned to the rooftop garden, a familiar refuge. The city's lights shimmered like stars, yet the wind carried whispers of the challenges yet to come. She leaned against the railing, reflecting on how far she had come from the terrified maid who had once stood in a gala hall, deciding in a heartbeat to act when lives were at stake. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Michael. "Dinner tomorrow. There's someone I think you should meet. Someone whose work aligns closely with yours. Trust me on this." Elena smiled faintly, feeling the rare warmth of camaraderie and trust. Every day brought new tests, unexpected crises, bureaucratic hurdles, and moments that demanded courage, but she had learned to navigate them with steady determination. That night, as she finally lay down in her modest apartment, she allowed herself a brief, rare moment of rest. Her mind wandered to her mother, safe and cared for, to Samuel, Mariana, and the other students she had touched, and to the quiet, unassuming victories that built the foundation of a life transformed. She understood now that courage wasn't only the act of throwing oneself into danger. It was the daily commitment to integrity, empathy, and relentless perseverance. And tomorrow she would face whatever shadows came, ready to illuminate them with her unwavering resolve. The morning sunlight poured through the windows of Elena's apartment, reflecting off the polished floors of the rooftop garden she had visited the night before. Today was different. The email from Michael had already set her mind racing. Someone influential, someone who could accelerate her mission to help students like Mariana. But the invitation carried an unspoken weight. Choices that could change the trajectory of her life. Elena arrived at the foundation early, as was her habit. The office hummed with activity, a quiet contrast to the chaos of the gala months ago. She passed familiar faces, staff members who had once been strangers, now allies, and felt a sense of grounding. Yet the sense of anticipation in the air was palpable. Today she wasn't just a liaison. She was stepping into a larger sphere of responsibility, one that would test her judgment, her courage, and her ethics. Michael greeted her in the conference room, a small smile on his face that betrayed both excitement and seriousness. "I'm glad you came early," he said. "I wanted to discuss the upcoming partnership with Dr. Adrian Cortez. He's leading an initiative to create mentorship programs in remote areas. I think your perspective would be invaluable." Elena nodded, feeling a flutter of nervous energy. Dr. Cortez was renowned in the field of education and philanthropy. His approach was rigorous, evidence-based, and fiercely ambitious. She respected him immensely, but she also knew that working with someone of his stature meant navigating complex expectations, competing agendas, and potential compromise. As they reviewed the project proposal, Elena noticed anomalies in some of the funding allocations. A significant portion of the budget for materials and transportation had been reallocated to administrative costs without proper explanation. She flagged it immediately. Michael, we need to clarify these numbers. If we move forward without transparency, the students will suffer, and the program could collapse before it begins. Michael leaned back in his chair, impressed by her vigilance. I agree, he said. Your attention to detail is exactly why I wanted you involved. We'll request a full breakdown before committing. Before they could proceed further, Elena's phone vibrated. It was a message from her mother. The landlord came by. Everything's fine, don't worry. But be careful, my brave girl. A pang of guilt hit her. The thought of her mother worrying while she navigated high-stakes decisions reminded her of why she had accepted this path. Not for recognition, but to ensure the safety and well-being of those who depended on her vigilance. Later that afternoon, Dr. Cortez arrived at the foundation. Tall, commanding, and meticulous, he exuded confidence that bordered on intimidation. Elena felt her heartbeat quicken, not from fear but from the awareness that every word, every gesture, every observation mattered. Ms. Rivera, he said, shaking her hand with a firm grip, I've heard excellent things. Michael speaks highly of your abilities. Thank you, Dr. Cortez, Elena replied, maintaining a steady tone despite the flutter of nerves. I'm here to ensure the programs serve the students effectively and responsibly. They dove into discussions exploring logistics, resource allocation, and mentorship strategies. Elena's input was precise, grounded in observation, and supported by practical experience from her work with Mariana and other students. Dr. Cortez listened intently, occasionally challenging her ideas, but always with a constructive edge that pushed her to refine her reasoning. As the meeting progressed, a critical decision loomed. A portion of the budget for the mentorship program had been earmarked for hiring additional staff. Dr. Cortez suggested outsourcing to a third-party contractor he trusted implicitly. Elena, however, had reservations. Her instincts told her that transparency and accountability could be compromised, and students might ultimately suffer. Dr. Cortez, she said carefully, I understand your recommendation, but I strongly advise we recruit directly. We can implement rigorous screening and training procedures. Outsourcing may be efficient, but it removes oversight and exposes the program to risk. There was a pause. Elena could feel the weight of the moment, the crossroads where courage and conviction intersected with authority and influence. Dr. Cortez studied her intently, his expression unreadable. After a tense moment, he nodded slowly. You have a point, Ms. Rivera. Let's do it your way. Direct recruitment, full oversight. Relief washed over Elena, but it was tempered by the realization that her path was now one of constant vigilance. Decisions like this, she knew, would repeat in varying forms. Integrity came at the cost of scrutiny, resistance, and occasional confrontation. Yet the spark of purpose she had felt when saving Michael's life now fueled every action she took. Later that evening she returned home, exhausted yet invigorated. Her mother greeted her with a gentle embrace, sensing both her fatigue and her quiet triumph. You're growing into the woman I always knew you could be, her mother whispered. Strong, brave, and wise. Elena smiled, allowing herself a moment of softness. The city lights outside her window twinkled with opportunity and challenge alike. She knew that the path ahead would be filled with unforeseen obstacles, moral dilemmas, and personal sacrifices. But for the first time in her life, she felt fully capable of facing them head-on, grounded in courage, clarity, and compassion. As she lay in bed that night, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the terrified maid who acted without thought in a gala hall, to the decisive young professional guiding mentorship programs for the next generation. She understood now that courage wasn't a single act. It was a habit, a daily commitment, and a quiet, persistent force that defined the trajectory of a life lived purposefully. Tomorrow the challenges would resume, new decisions would demand integrity, and new lives would depend on her vigilance. And Elena, awake with resolve, was ready for all of it. The morning air carried a crisp clarity as Elena stepped onto the terrace of the Foundation's headquarters. The city stretched out beneath her, a glittering lattice of ambition and possibility. The journey that had begun months ago in chaos and fear had transformed into something steady, purposeful, and profoundly hopeful. Today was not just another day at the Foundation. It was the culmination of trials, courage and decisions that had reshaped her life entirely. Inside the foundation, the offices were calm, orderly, and welcoming. Elena passed her colleagues, each nod and smile reflecting mutual respect and quiet admiration. Her role had grown beyond that of a liaison. She now coordinated mentorship programs, guided resource allocation, and evaluated student needs with precision. Every choice she made, every recommendation she offered carried weight. The stakes were high, but for the first time she felt ready. Michael entered the room, his expression calm yet warm, a contrast to the storm they had weathered together. The bruise on his jaw, once a mark of terror and danger, had fully faded, leaving only the memory of how close catastrophe had come. "Good morning, Elena," he said, voice steady. "We have an important visit today. The City Council wants to see our mentorship pilot program in action. I want you to lead the presentation." Elena nodded, her pulse quickening, not with fear but with anticipation. She had been entrusted with responsibility that mattered, a sign of the faith Michael and the foundation placed in her abilities. It was a trust she would honor. The pilot school was a modest facility in a part of the city often overlooked. Students arrived with eager curiosity and wide-eyed hope, unaware that the program had been born from a series of events that could have ended in tragedy. Elena walked them through the initiative, demonstrating new mentorship pairings, tutoring strategies, and workshops designed to equip them with skills both academic and personal. She noticed the students' bright eyes, the shy smiles, and the sudden spark of engagement that confirmed her belief. Attention, care, and opportunity could transform lives. After the presentation, City Council members congratulated her, commending her insight, initiative, and dedication. Elena listened, grateful yet grounded, reminding herself that the accolades were not her goal. She had acted before for someone else's life, and now she acted for countless young lives waiting for a chance to shine. Later, back at the foundation, Elena found a quiet moment alone. She reflected on the path that had brought her here. The gala, the poison, the desperate punch, and the chaotic revelations that had exposed greed and deceit at the highest levels. She had been terrified, untrained, and ordinary, but she had acted. Her courage had created ripples that led to justice, accountability, and ultimately, a life imbued with purpose. Michael entered the room quietly, holding a small folder. "I wanted to give you something," he said, placing it on the table. Inside were documents formalizing her position, including a mentorship program expansion plan she would now oversee. There was also a stipend to support her family's needs and funding to complete her education. Elena's eyes welled with tears, but they were tears of relief, gratitude, and a profound sense of destiny fulfilled. "Thank you, Michael," she whispered. "Not just for this, but for trusting me, for giving me the chance to make a difference." He smiled, his eyes reflecting the depth of respect he held for her. "You didn't just save my life, Elena. You've saved the lives of countless others starting today. Courage like yours is rare and it deserves recognition. But more than that, it deserves a platform to create change. That's what we've built together." The days that followed were filled with new challenges and responsibilities. Elena navigated board meetings, mentorship scheduling, and student outreach. Each task tested her judgment, persistence, and empathy, but she met them with the quiet strength that had been forged in the crucible of the gala night. One afternoon, as she walked through the city streets after a school visit, she noticed small yet profound signs of change. Neighbors nodding respectfully, vendors greeting her with recognition, and even the landlord, once stern and threatening, offering a genuine smile and words of encouragement. The world, it seemed, was beginning to mirror the transformation she had experienced within herself. That evening, the foundation hosted a private rooftop gathering to celebrate the mentors and staff who had supported the programs. There were no cameras, no press, just warm lights, gentle music, and a shared sense of accomplishment. Michael raised a glass, his eyes finding Elena's across the small circle. "To those who see what others miss," he said, voice filled with quiet reverence. "To those who act when seconds matter. And to the courage that changes lives." Elena lifted her glass, steady and assured. She thought of her mother sleeping peacefully at home, of the students she would continue to guide, of the life she had once feared was lost. "To second chances," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of experience and hope. They drank, the sweetness of the juice a symbol of the life and possibilities she now embraced. The The city lights twinkled like distant stars, each one a reflection of potential, growth, and the countless lives that could now be touched by a single courageous act. Elena felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by a quiet certainty. Life was no longer a series of uncertain days. It was a canvas of opportunity, painted with choices, integrity, and bravery. She smiled, knowing that she had stepped from fear into purpose, from survival into leadership. Her journey had begun in chaos, but it had led her here, to a future forged in courage, compassion, and the unshakable belief that doing the right thing could change the world, one life at a time. And for Elena that was enough.